Hey everyone, Logan from the Wilsey Farm channel here. And one of the projects that I'm hoping to get done before winter time is to build myself a miniature sugar shack just temporarily. Eventually it's going to go down in the valley over here where the maple trees all are so that I can pitch the lines down into the house. But for right now it just needs its own space. So the first step of the process is going to be pouring this slab here. It's just going to be a 4-inch slab, nothing too fancy. As soon as I build my bigger sugar shack, this one's simply going to become a storage shed for garden tools and stuff like that. So what I have here is two 2x4 by 10 foot long and two 2x4 by 12 foot long. And the reason I picked this size is in New York State, 12 by 12 or 144 square feet is the largest new structure that you can build without a permit. So we're gonna do a 10 by 12 slab here today, and I'll show you guys how it's done. All right, so the next thing I did was took some 2x6s and made them into stakes, ripped 2x6s into 3 and then cut points on them. And another thing, since you want your slab to be nice and square, another thing that helps is just to check the length of the boards that you bought. Lay one on top of the other and make sure they're exactly the same length, and that'll help you get off to an easier start when you go to square it up. Because if one of them's a ½ inch longer and you put them all flush on the outsides, no matter how hard you try, you're not going to get it square. So you need to start with boards that are the same length. So now that we have the stakes are all made and the form is laying here, we're ready to screw the form boards together. Make sure the screws that you put into the forms you can get out after the concrete's poured. Make sure they're all screwed from the outside, and the same thing with the stakes. When we stake this off, we're gonna do it from the outside. So we're gonna screw the form together and then we'll talk about squaring it up. So now there's two ways for us to square up this form to make sure that all corners are 90 degrees. And the one way is if you have something small like this, where it's not too long, you can measure the diagonals. And if the diagonals are exactly equal, measuring off the same points, so if you're hooking on the outside of your forms, you want to make sure you do the exact same thing when you measure the other diagonal. If the diagonals are equal and the boards are fairly straight, then you know that the form is square. Another way to do it if you're working on something bigger is to use, I guess, algebra or geometry, one or the other, where you know that a 90-degree triangle, the hypotenuse is 5 and the two legs are 3 and 4. So a 3, 4, 5 triangle makes a perfect 90-degree. So we can go on the form and measuring off the outside and marking the outside, we can go 3 feet one way, 4 feet the other way, and then move the form until it's perfectly 5 feet between those two marks. When you measure your angle, if you're doing a 3, 4, 5 method, use one edge of the tape measure. Don't have one person holding you on this side and then you come down and twist the tape measure around like this and measure on the other side, because it's going to give you an incorrect, inaccurate reading. So when you're squaring something up, just take your time and start with the corners. If you set your corners first and use the level, and we're going to screw, actually put the stake on the outside corner and we're going to screw from the outside of the stake into the form and then use the level to hold across to the next corner. Hold it up level and screw that side in through the outside of the stake also. So here we go. Okay guys, so now that the form is all staked off and level, you can see in this back corner over here, it's pretty high off the ground. So that would end up being like a foot of concrete thick, and I really don't want to shoot for that. So one of our options is to dig in the lowest corner, which is this one. We could drop that one into the ground, which would bring us down roughly 3.5 inches. So we'd still end up with roughly about a 8 to 9 inch corner over there. So our next option is to bring in gravel, which we could bring the gravel right up to the bottom of the form all the way around, and then we'd have a true 4-inch slab on a really good base. But I'm gonna do something probably ill-advised, and when I first moved into this house there was stone steps out in the front. So I'm gonna go grab some of those stones that I saved and kind of dry lay a foundation inside of this and almost make like a edge for the concrete and then pour around that and up to it, and hopefully that'll hold. I don't really have high hopes for it. Again, this is just a temporary kind of structure, more of a shed for the yard, but we'll see how it comes out. Okay guys, now we're all finished with the little mock foundation that I put around the slab, and we put a vapor barrier underneath it so that we can tie the concrete to that stone, as well as we have rebar in there. You can see the rebar mesh sheets. They're overlapped to make sure that it's grabbing throughout the entire slab. That's what actually gives the concrete its strength, is the steel. And then one extra piece of 1/2-inch rebar that I just had laying around that I figured I would just throw in the bottom of that. So here's what the foundation kind of looks like, stone dry laid from the outside. And now that we have the vapor barrier down, because concrete is porous, so if it's going to be a dried in structure that you're pouring concrete in, you want the concrete to be able to get dry or not absorb moisture through the bottom. If it's a patio or something, you just want good drainage underneath, because obviously it's going to be getting wet and you don't want to trap that moisture on the bottom. You want it to be able to get all the way through. Also, if you're going to insulate and heat the structure, you want to make sure that you insulate underneath and around the slab as well. This, however, is just going to be a shed, so it's going to be dry, so all we're doing is putting a vapor barrier down. So now that we have all the stones laid around it, the vapor barrier's in, the rebar's in, we're ready to get concrete. Okay guys, so we're back with the concrete, and I made one mistake, which is underestimating the length of garden hose I was going to need to get to the mixer. So I'm stopped here, and the slab is down there probably about 40 feet away, I would say. So it's going to be a lot of wheelbarrow work, especially for one person. It's kind of a pain, but we're getting ready to pour it. And I just want to show you guys something. A lot of people don't know this because they'll take a knife to the edge of the bag or something and waste a lot of time. But if you look closely at the front of this bag right here, you'll see a little arrow right there. And what that arrow is that shows you where to rip the bag open. You stick your fingers in that, where the arrow is, and rip up. And it'll make a nice little pour spout for you to pour it either into the mixer, or if you're mixing by hand, into the wheelbarrow, and makes everything a lot faster and easier and a little bit neater. So we're gonna set up the time lapse, and hopefully this doesn't take till dark. All right, so I forgot to get the time lapse going before I got started. I'm 50 bags deep and I'm pretty tired, but I got 30 more to go. So I'll get the time lapse going now. All right, so that was all 80 bags, and unfortunately, like an idiot, I ran short. So I'm about 10 bags short. So now I'm gonna have to do a little bit of dirty work, since the form I can't use to screed on top of to know that everything's perfectly level. I'm gonna have to get in there and use my level and scrape the concrete back towards me as I pull and keep checking for level, use the placer and the trowel and try and get it as close as I can. So here we go. So there we have it. That's all smoothed out. It's still pretty wet, so we're not going to worry about it too much. And we'll get cleaned up and get all the tools put away, and then we'll be out in a couple hours to check on it. And you want to keep troweling it as it's drying, and depending how smooth of a finish you want. If this is like a barn or something, it's probably fine now, but if you want to go crazy, you can keep troweling it until it's dry. Basically every couple hours or every hour, come out and check on it. So we'll show you the finished product later. Alright, so here we have the slab all finished up, and you can see this looks like a stone foundation there, and it'll be more clear once there's walls and everything around it. And guys, I ran short on concrete and it still came out fine. I mean, that's the worst thing really that'll happen to you, and it's rained probably for the past 2 days and there's hardly any puddling there, maybe a 1/16 of an inch deep, which isn't too bad considering I ran short. So don't be afraid to go ahead and try and do something yourself, because this is going to be plenty good enough for my temporary sugar shack. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you had any comments or any questions or anything you want to see turned into a video, just drop it into the comments below. Thanks. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram to see more of me and the 2 farm pups. Hey boys.